I want to thank my subscriber, the Republic of Ireland 4136, for suggesting this horrific case. Anyway, on with the video. In September 2013, the skeletonized remains of vulnerable 36-year-old Elaine O'Hara were found in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains in the Republic of Ireland. Elaine had been missing for a year, and her family and the police had been desperately searching for her this entire time. Elaine had a history of mental health issues, and unfortunately, she'd fallen into the web of Graham Dwyer, a depraved sexual sadist who murdered Elaine. The evidence recovered by the police was nothing short of horrific, including thousands of messages where Elaine was referred to as slave and Dwyer was master, with him repeatedly telling her about his intention to stab and kill her. An example of a message sent by Dwyer reads, quote, "I want to stick my knife in flesh while sexually aroused. Blood turns me on. I'd like to stab a girl to death. Welcome to Evil Among Us." Elaine O'Hara was born on the 17th of March 1976 in Dublin in the Republic of Ireland to Eileen and Frank O'Hara. Elaine didn't have an easy upbringing. She was bullied in school and was a nervous and anxious child. On top of this, when she was a teenager, one of her closest friends was killed in a car accident. By the age of 14 or 15 years old, Elaine was starting to show significant issues with her mental health. She would frequently self-harm and was regularly hospitalised for psychiatric treatment. Her mental health issues took a toll on her being able to have a normal childhood, with her father Frank stating, quote, "We used to take her out on a Saturday, then she'd fall asleep in the cafe. She was so heavily medicated. She never experienced those years that other kids do." On top of this, Elaine had a number of other health issues, including diabetes and asthma, and she struggled in school due to being dyslexic. Elaine's mental health understandably deteriorated when she lost her mother in 2002, when she was 26 years old, and her frequency of self-harming incidents increased significantly during this time, and she made a serious attempt on her life in 2005. Elaine had regular counselling and became especially close to a therapist called Professor Anthony Clare, and the pair worked together for a number of years. However, when Professor Clare unexpectedly died in 2007, Elaine again sunk into a deep depression and attempted suicide by taking an overdose, leading to her being in a coma for 24 hours when she was rushed to hospital. Elaine had very low self-esteem. She believed herself to be worthless and used self-harm as a way to relieve her emotions, but also to punish herself for being useless. Her father also described her as, quote, "emotionally immature and very trusting of anyone who showed her kindness." However, despite Elaine's difficulties, she was a fighter, as well as a kind and caring person who worked hard to improve her life. She had a niece who was also a goddaughter, and the pair adored each other. Elaine would often be found spending time with her niece, reading or painting with her. The two were very close. Heartbreakingly, after her disappearance, her niece would point to cars that were the same model as hers and say, quote, "Look, it's Elaine's car," whilst getting excited, thinking her best friend was back. But this would never happen. Elaine also had an amazing work ethic, and she was determined to make something of her life. She moved out of the family home and lived in her own flat, and had two jobs, one working at a newsagent's, and the other as a teaching assistant at St John's School in Ballybrack. Elaine adored children and loved working at the school and would help out any way she could, including setting up and running school fetes. She wanted children of her own one day, and, in her spare time, was studying to become a Montessori teacher. This is a style of teaching which revolves around hands-on education and developing real-world skills. She'd also help out at local festivals. Elaine's whole life was around pleasing others. However, Elaine had a terrible secret, which would eventually cost her her life. After her disappearance in 2012, police were able to establish that, in around 2007, Elaine had made a profile on a BDSM website known as alt.com. She stated she was a submissive and was in search of a dominant male. Broadly speaking, bondage, discipline, sadism and masochism, better known as BDSM, is a type of sexual behaviour characterised by participants taking on roles usually with one being submissive, i.e. compliant to the wishes of the other, or dominant, i.e. the one directing their partner. The behaviour used during this type of sexual activity can be extremely broad and can go from light restraints and spanking to extreme acts of sexual violence. I'll come back to the issue of BDSM later on. How Elaine became interested in this type of sexual activity is unclear. It appears she was sexually inexperienced, which made the material found on her computer even more shocking. Recovered from her computer was also a document entitled, quote, "The Gorian Lifestyle, A Woman's Right is Slave." For context, this quote-unquote philosophy stems from a series of books written by American author John Norman, which is set on the planet Gore, which repeatedly depicts men abducting and physically and sexually violating women who grow to enjoy this abuse. I've not read these books, but they're widely considered to be extremely misogynistic and have unfortunately led to the development of a subculture which believes in the, quote, Gorian lifestyle, which appears to revolve around the belief that women's only role is to serve males, that they, as a gender, are inferior to men. The document found on Elaine's computer read in part, quote, "What is your name and identity? If you're a woman practicing a Gorian lifestyle, you don't have one. Your identity is Kajira, a slave, and you serve a master who orders you to do whatever he pleases. You have no rights, and never address yourself as I or me. Instead, you address yourself as master's slave. Refusal to do this results in punishment, usually a whipping. Gorian philosophy believes that men have a natural drive to dominate women. Women have a strong desire to submit to men and give up their rights. Women are either free or enslaved, but free women can be enslaved at any time. Slaves aren't seen as people. They are, according to Gorian followers, human animals. Masters make decisions for them. They lose rights to their name. Their master chooses their name, although slaves are not allowed to refer to themselves by their name. This is the sort of material that a vulnerable young woman who just wanted to be loved was reading. I think that Elaine unfortunately believed she could turn her passiveness and general difficulties into a strength by offering herself as a submissive. This way, people would pay attention to her, and, in her mind, they would want her, and maybe even love her. However, she was in a very dangerous world, surrounded by sharks, communicating with rapists, misogynists, and men whose only desire was to inflict serious violence and even kill women. One of these men went by the screen name Architect72, and the pair began communicating in late 2007. This username belonged to 35-year-old Graham Dwyer, an extremely dangerous psychopath who had fantasies about stabbing and murdering women. Unfortunately, this relationship would eventually cost Elaine her life. Graham Dwyer was born on the 13th of September 1972 in Brandon in County Cork to Sean and Susan Dwyer. He was one of 4 children, and after completing secondary school, he moved to Dublin in the early 1990s. There was nothing extraordinary about Dwyer's childhood, nothing that's been reported, but it's clear he'd begun to develop fantasies about stabbing, mutilating, raping, and murdering women in his early teens. Dwyer is the epitome of a chameleon, someone who was able to blend in with society, wearing a mask of sanity, whilst indulging his sick, deviant fantasies. Dwyer studied architecture at the Dublin Institute of Technology, and, during this time, he started a relationship with a woman called Emma, and the pair had a son together. Emma later testified in court that Dwyer had confessed to her that he had fantasies about stabbing women during intercourse. He would bring a knife into the bedroom and use this to pretend to stab her during sex, specifically making a stabbing motion with the knife, but stopping short of actually cutting her skin. The relationship ended in 1996, and a year later, he began dating a fellow architecture student called Gemma Healy, who became his wife in 2002. Dwyer became a successful architect and began living the high life, including having a luxury home and driving expensive cars, but he was living well beyond his means, and by the early 2010s, he was heavily in debt. It doesn't appear from what I can see that Gemma was subject to violence or abuse in the relationship, and outwardly, Dwyer portrayed himself as a loving husband and father. I think this is because Dwyer knew that his behaviour could easily be reported to the police. He needed to separate his home life from his fancy life, so he went online. Dwyer would view extreme pornography, watching simulated rape, and viewing photographs of women who'd been mutilated in accidents or as a result of murders. Dwyer also took to writing his own stories. One of them was entitled, quote, "It was just so hot walking along Grafton Street." This was written in May 2005 and tells the story of a woman walking around St Stephen's Green in Dublin city centre, who's approached by a man who grabs her by the throat and drags her into the undergrowth, where he rapes her, whilst having the knife pressed into her throat, which draws blood. Dwyer also wrote a story called, quote, "Killing Darcy," which was a semi-autobiographical piece in which he wrote, quote, "Months have gone by, and soon the day would finally arrive. From the first email, I knew this one was special. I'd always fantasized about killing ever since I was a teen, and I got hard any time there was a knife in my hand, wielding the power, knowing I could decide who lived or died, just like my hero, God." No doubt Dwyer would masturbate to this material, reinforcing his own disgusting sexual proclivities, and, as the thrill he got from this behaviour wore off, he started searching for women to abuse, and joined, amongst other websites, alt.com, looking for vulnerable women he could use and abuse, and, in late 2007, he reached out to Elaine O'Hara. The horror of the interaction between Elaine O'Hara and Graham Dwyer was pieced together after her disappearance in 2012 from extremely disturbing text messages, one of which I read out at the beginning of the video, but this was mild compared to the others he sent. Also, Dwyer would film his sickening sexual behaviour. I won't call it a relationship. Instead, I'll refer to it as the abuse of Elaine, and I think you'll see why. This began around 2008. During this time, the pair met up, always at Elaine's property, where she'd be tied up and violated by Dwyer, who had filmed the abuse. Later, investigators would recover a library of these disturbing videos, with two of these specifically showing Elaine. In one video, Elaine is seen naked, bound and apparently gagged, screaming, but this is muffled. She also has her arms tied behind her back and her feet bound with chains. Dwyer is seen naked, stabbing Elaine repeatedly in the abdomen from behind. In another video, Dwyer was shown cutting Elaine with a knife before stabbing her in the abdomen several times whilst having sex with her, while she is heard to say, quote, "Please stop." At the end of the abuse, Dwyer is heard to say, quote, "No, that wasn't bad, was it?" However, the videos didn't just show Elaine. It was clear there were other victims of Dwyer. Further videos were found of other women. In one, a woman is shown bound and gagged whilst Dwyer sat astride her, stabbing her with a knife, with this woman screaming in pain. Dwyer then had sex with this woman while she was restrained. In another video, Dwyer is seen behind a woman and attempted to stab her in the breasts. The woman fights back and is heard to say, quote, "Fucking hell, fuck me, stop this please," before the clip ends. In a clip that Dwyer entitled, quote, "Bloodletting," he's shown holding the breast of a naked woman and then drawing a knife across it, before zooming in for a close-up, before squeezing the breast so that blood oozes from it. Another video, titled, quote, "First Stabbing," shows Dwyer stabbing a bound and gagged woman at least 9 times while she screams in terror. There were several other videos in the same vein. Who these other women were does not appear to have ever been established, and their fates were unknown. It's also unclear whether some of the women in the other videos featured more than once, or whether each was a unique victim, but, conservatively, it seems that Dwyer had abused at least 5 other women, in addition to Elaine, subjecting them to acts of extreme depravity and sadism. An obvious question is, why did these women not die from these wounds? However, Dwyer was a skilled and methodical offender. He specifically targeted the abdomen area, avoiding major organs such as the liver, and would use a small bladed knife, enough to draw blood and to cause the pain he desperately craved, but not enough to kill. With regards to Elaine, examination of the mattress in her flat showed that it was covered in dried blood, and there was a large amount of semen belonging to Dwyer. Their interaction dwindled in around 2009, but then, unfortunately, Dwyer reached out to Elaine in March 2011 in order to regain control over her and ultimately, in my opinion, kill her. What Dwyer had been doing in the intervening years is unclear, but it's apparent that his homicidal urges had increased and he was now even more dangerous. Thousands of text messages were recovered from this point until Elaine's disappearance in August 2012, and they are horrific to say the least. In June 2011, Dwyer sent Elaine the message that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which read, quote, "I want to stick my knife in flesh while sexually aroused. Blood turns me on. I'd like to stab a girl to death." He also sent text messages around this same time saying, quote, "My urge to rape, stab or kill is huge. You have to help me control or satisfy it. And I am a sadist. I enjoy others' pain. You should help me inflict pain on you and help me with my fantasies." Elaine was subjected to further stabbings, but had clearly had enough of this, and on July the 30th, 2011, she sent a message saying, quote, "I don't want you to stab me anymore." However, Dwyer was relentless. He continued to talk about his fantasies about wanting to rape, stab and kill women, and repeatedly told Elaine how he would kill her. This included him stating on one occasion, quote, "I'll take off your clothes, stab you, bury you, leave your clothes in the car by the sea, looks like you drowned." Dwyer was fully aware of Elaine's vulnerabilities and used them against her. He would berate her, calling her useless, old and fat, and would keep her dangling by stating he would eventually give her a child, something she desperately wanted. Dwyer was also fully aware of Elaine's issues with self-harm and suicide, and he sent the following sickening message, quote, "If you ever want to die, promise me I can do it. I've everything ready if it becomes too much. Just think, all your worries gone, I can put you to sleep. I know you want it. 30 seconds to slip into oblivion." Elaine, playing the role of the submissive, would always be referred to as slave, and she would always refer to Dwyer as Sir. Unfortunately, despite obvious red flags, Elaine could not see the danger she was in, and did not know that Dwyer had selected her as the woman he was going to murder, to live out his sick sexual fantasies, and by mid-2012, he'd begun to put his plans into action. In around July 2012, Graham Dwyer had formulated his plan to kill Elaine O'Hara and began to put his plan into motion. He'd scouted out isolated locations to commit the murder and selected a patch of isolated woodland near Clare in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. He also asked Elaine whether she had told anyone about him, to which she said no, and he told her to keep it that way. On the 21st of August 2012, a hunting knife that Dwyer ordered arrived at his place of work, and he then set about luring Elaine to her place of death. I have no doubt that Elaine would have been murdered sooner, but for approximately 6 weeks before her death, she'd been at St Edmundsbury Hospital, where she'd voluntarily entered psychiatric care due to reporting to doctors that she'd made a noose to end her own life. This was at least her 14th admission to hospital in her life. She had access to her phone and was in constant contact with Dwyer. There was no sympathy. His only concern was that she thought about killing herself without telling him, so that he could end her life instead. Late in the evening of the 21st of August 2012, Elaine did speak to a nurse and told them about what she was doing and showed the scars from the multiple stab wounds on her body. She was encouraged to call the police, as this was abuse, but she didn't follow through with this advice. She also didn't tell the nurse the man's name. At least one of her friends had noticed scars on her body as well, but, unfortunately, they appeared to have assumed that she had caused them herself. Elaine was scheduled to be discharged on Wednesday the 22nd of August 2012, and Dwyer could not wait. He planned to kill Elaine as soon as she was back in the world. The final messages that Dwyer sent to Elaine are sickening, and they show the hold that he had over her, as well as his level of depravity, and him luring her into his trap. I'm going to read out the messages between the pair. Obviously, it's just me reading out a conversation between two people, but it should be obvious who's saying what. However, I've put the text on the screen so you can follow along. So the messages state, quote, "Morning, slave. Look forward to seeing you Wednesday. I'm not being stabbed. Okay, but you must take some form of punishment. I know. What kind of punishment would you like? Choices are hard anal with stabbing and choking, whipping till bleeding, chained overnight in forest, choked unconscious. If you don't pick one, then it's all four. I don't know, sir. Sorry, Doc came in. Sir, you know I can't make choices. Okay, overnight in woods. Sir, I'll take stabbing. Okay, but I must see blood. Okay. And I want to do it outdoors. Please, sir, indoors. Why? I'm afraid if outdoors, you might kill me. I won't kill you. If I was, it would be indoor, hanging once you are chained up. Are you mad, sir? No, but you must be punished for trying to kill yourself without me, and for being unavailable for so long. Yes, sir, I know. Master needs to punish slave. I'm going to get blood on my knife for this. A lot of blood. Then we can move on. Yes, sir. That's my good slave. Master is very horny, and needs to put his cock in slave. Master, may I ask you something? Yes, but don't upset me before I'm about to cut you. Do you go by the Gorian way? And is it just a fantasy, I mean? It's a real lifestyle that people really live by. Yes, you are my slave, but I need you to be serving me, not stuck in hospital. I wish I could fuck you on my lunch break. How do we do that, Master? You need to get out of hospital and serve me. Sir, please stop. You want me to be in here forever? Can't we just have a normal S&M relationship without this, please, sir? Okay, but promise me next time you fall down that I end you. Hopefully, you'll be okay though. Okay, I promise, sir. I mean it now. I'll get in trouble if I don't do it at this stage. What do you mean? How could you get into trouble? It's suicide. It's fucking suicide. No one will look into it. I want to watch as well, and be there for you, so you won't be lonely. Shit, that's shit. I am lonely all the time, and you're not there. That's how I get like this. You just want a hard-on. You're being fucking selfish. Sir, sorry. Just get angry talking about it. I just want to try again. Be a good person, /slave/friend. And I want to try and have a normal life without talking and thinking about it. Please let me try. Okay. Why can't my punishments be like that, sir? Living on bread and butter for a week. I'll take what you give, sir, but can have some punishments like that, or live on 5 a day, and you take my cards, just normal. It's up to me, and you have a big punishment coming up, getting knifed in the guts. I know, sir. I better be tied up good, sir. Please, not outdoors, please. What if we get caught? We won't get caught. I'm not leaving my apartment. You'll have to drag me out. You will do what you are fucking told. I want outdoor play. You're going to follow instructions, or I will double punishment or hang you. How do you know we won't get caught? I found a really, really remote place. No one will find us. Sir, do I have to be naked? It's very deep in the forest, and yes you do. I don't want blood over your clothes. Now I'm terrified. Trust me, it will be exciting. Sure, sir. So what time do you want me from tomorrow, sir? I was going to go see my niece before I went home, as there are holes next 2 weeks. 5:30. Yes, sir. Do I have to drive, sir? A bit, yes. Now I'm really scared, and I have to meet my counsellor. Don't be scared. Look forward to being reunited with Master. I'm trying, sir. Just in case you're wondering, sir, you never came up in conversation with counsellor. That's good. No one should know about me. They don't know specifically about you, just the general. Like what? Like I meet people. For BDSM. Okay, that's cool. They'll still find me way back in your emails and alt history if you went missing, so relax. At midday on the 22nd of August 2012, Elaine was discharged from hospital and returned to her flat in Bellarmine Place, Stepaside in Dublin. She visited her father and niece, and then went and bought a garden plant to put on her mother's grave. She drove to Shanganagh Cemetery, where her mother had been laid to rest, and was seen crying next to her grave. Elaine then went back home and left her flat for the last time at 4 p.m. She was last seen around an hour later, back at the cemetery, asking for directions to a local railway bridge. Elaine was never seen alive again. What happened next will never be known for certain, but, as her car was found next to the cemetery, it's assumed that Dwyer picked her up in his vehicle and drove Elaine to the murder site in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. He then likely had violent sex with her while she was tied up, and stabbed her, but this time stabbed her to death. He then left her body in the open and returned to his normal life. It's believed that Elaine was dead within a matter of hours of the last sighting of her. Elaine's family became concerned when she failed to show up to see them the next day, and when she missed work at the newsagents, and the police were called. Searches were conducted, and, whilst her vehicle was found quickly, there was no sign of Elaine. It was unfortunately assumed that she'd likely committed suicide by jumping off of some cliffs near the cemetery. It was not until a year later the true horror of Elaine's life and death was revealed. A woman called Margalie Vanette would regularly walk her dogs in Clare in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, and, beginning on the 21st of August 2013, one of her dogs would run off and come back holding a bone, which Margalie assumed was from an animal. However, on the 13th of September 2013, one of the dogs returned with a bone with clothing on it, and Margalie became concerned that these were human remains. She contacted the landowner, and they and another man started combing the area. They soon came across bones scattered across a wide area, and they were able to identify a human jawbone and a rib cage. Police were called, and they confirmed that the remains were human. Only 65% of Elaine's remains were recovered. Her bones had been taken by wild animals. Her skull was never found, but her jawbone enabled dental records to be used to confirm her identity. On the 10th of September 2013, 3 days before the discovery of Elaine's remains, and 15 miles south of where this occurred, 3 men at the Vartry Reservoir near Roundwood in County Wicklow spotted something shiny and a yellow rope in the water. The men fished out the items, which included a woman's vest top, a hoodie, handcuffs on chains, leg restraints, and a leather face mask with a ball on the front. The men took the items to the police, and the next day, further searches were conducted, and other items were recovered, including 2 Nokia phones, SIM cards, handcuffs, sex toys, glasses, house keys, car keys, and loyalty cards. One of the loyalty cards was for a grocery store. It had a barcode on it, and police asked the store to verify who owned the loyalty card. It was Elaine O'Hara's card. The police put these discoveries together and realised they were likely looking at a suspicious death, and they began to investigate. However, it seems like initially they weren't sure it was definitely a murder. However, when they went to Elaine's flat, saw the blood and semen stains on her mattress, and recovered her computer, and saw the contents, they knew that she was murdered, and they were dealing with a depraved, sadistic, and extremely dangerous man who needed to be stopped. The police were able to establish the true identity of the man that Elaine had been communicating with, Graham Dwyer, and, in October 2013, the police raided his home, seized his computer and phone, and arrested him on suspicion of Elaine's murder. It seems like this arrest came as a complete surprise to Dwyer. Like many psychopaths, he considered himself smarter than everyone. His plan was, in his mind, foolproof. He'd picked a location where he thought that Elaine's body would never be found, and, if it was, there'd be no proof that he'd killed her. For the years since the murder, Dwyer had lived his life as normal, whatever normal was to a man like this, including having a 40th birthday party mere weeks after killing Elaine, where this photo was taken. Dwyer dug himself a nice deep hole during his interrogations. No, he didn't know Elaine. When he was shown CCTV footage of him going into her property, he changed this to "Yes, I knew Elaine, but I was just a friend." Then when confronted with the DNA evidence of semen found at the property, "Yes, I slept with her, but it was all consensual." He denied having anything to do with her death. However, there was enough evidence to charge him, and Dwyer was remanded into custody to await his day in court. Graham Dwyer pleaded not guilty to murdering Elaine O'Hara, and so stood trial at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin, beginning on the 22nd of January 2015. Dwyer's main defence strategy was highlighting the fact that Elaine's cause of death could not be definitively established due to the decomposition of her body, so it could not be ruled out that she'd killed herself. His defence argued that the disgusting messages to Elaine showed that he was a complete and utter dick with depraved sexual appetites who used and abused vulnerable women, but this didn't necessarily make him a killer. The prosecution, however, countered this with a wealth of evidence. They stated that whilst no cause of death could be established, Dwyer was a dangerous man who made repeated threats to kill Elaine, had filmed himself stabbing her on several occasions, as well as doing this to other women, and he'd been the one who had lured her to the location where she was last seen alive. They argued that Elaine was slaughtered to fulfill his sick sexual fantasies. The jury agreed, and on the 27th of March 2015, he was convicted unanimously of Elaine's murder. The judge, Tony Hunt, stated that he, quote, 110% agreed with the jury's decision. 3 weeks later, Dwyer was back before Judge Hunt for sentencing. The judge described it as a, quote, chilling murder following a, quote, vile manipulation of Elaine, and that Dwyer had not shown any remorse for his actions at any stage during the trial. He then sentenced him. For the murder of Elaine O'Hara, Graham Dwyer was sentenced to life imprisonment. I've been unable to confirm the tariff, but it appears he's expected to serve at least 28 years in prison before he can apply for parole. There have been several reports about Dwyer's time in prison, including his close friendships with other vile murderers. Two have been mentioned in particular. The first, Gerald Barry, raped and murdered Swiss teenager Manuela Riedo in October 2007 in Galway, just 2 days after she'd arrived in Ireland to learn English. The second, multiple murderer Mark Nash, killed 4 people beginning in March 1997 when he broke into sheltered accommodation on the grounds of a psychiatric hospital in Dublin and butchered 2 of the residents, Mary Callanan, aged 61, and 6-year-old Sylvia Sheils. This included him cutting their throats and causing them horrific facial and genital injuries. Just 5 months later, in August 1997, Nash was at a house party when, in a drunken state, he suddenly began stabbing his girlfriend, and when 28-year-old Catherine Doyle and her 29-year-old husband Cole Doyle intervened, they were also stabbed. Whilst his girlfriend survived, both Caroline and Cole were killed. These are the sort of people reviled by other prisoners, but Dwyer was drawn to them, no doubt because they victimised women, and he got off on their stories of their crimes. Dwyer, the narcissist that he is, apparently, when his case was first reported, would gleefully look through newspapers, looking for stories about himself and relishing the reporting of his crimes. Prison hasn't stood in the way of Dwyer trying to get his kicks, and in around 2017, he was caught with 5 USB sticks filled with extreme pornography featuring BDSM, including videos of simulated rape and women being tortured. Dwyer has never admitted his guilt, and his level of denial borders on the delusional, with him more recently claiming that, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, he was not having an affair with Elaine, and instead was trying to support her due to her vulnerabilities to find a partner that she could start a family with. So you help a vulnerable woman by subjecting her to violent sexual acts, stabbing her and filming it, as well as sending messages saying you want to kill her. What an absolute fucking prick. Dwyer's delusions also extended to his grounds for appealing his sentence at the Court of Appeal in December 2022. I would have loved to have been in this hearing. The base of the appeal appeared to be that Dwyer was claiming that he did not send any of the text messages to Elaine. When these were read out, he interrupted the hearing on several occasions, saying he didn't send them and he was told to shut the fuck up. Well, it was probably more polite than that. Something like, would the appellant please shut the fuck up? However, Dwyer's appeal was torn apart for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was proven that other messages sent from that phone could be linked to him, including texts Dwyer had sent about being in meetings which he could be shown to have attended. There was even a text about the birth of his second child. There was more, but you get the idea. It was his phone. However, it was also pointed out there was DNA evidence, as well as videos of him stabbing Elaine. Safe to say, the appeal was thrown out, and Graham Dwyer remains in prison, delusional and extremely dangerous. I've read that he will have to serve another 20 years in prison, meaning that he will be eligible for parole when he is 70 years old. Given the danger this man poses, I'd be surprised if he is ever released. Graham Dwyer is a sexual psychopath, pure and simple. He got sexual pleasure out of inflicting pain on women and subjecting them to horrific acts of abuse. I'm not making any judgments about what people do in the privacy of their own homes, but BDSM is a sexual behaviour that concerns me. It obviously includes a wide spectrum of behaviours, but I think it becomes extremely dangerous if both partners are not consenting and doing it for the right reasons, and, most importantly, if one partner is in distress, withdraws their consent, will the other person stop? I'm particularly concerned when it tips into this whole master-slave relationship. I think this is a terrifying dynamic, with someone essentially owning someone else, using them for their own sexual purposes, and it's definitely not okay when acts of serious violence are involved, like, in this case, stabbing. I think the main issue is the likely vulnerability of the one who's submissive, and the reasons why they put themselves in this position, as I'll mention in the final part of this video. With Dwyer, him using the label of BDSM was just a front for his sadistic behaviour. He couldn't care less about the women he essentially raped and abused. They were beneath him, the master manipulator, the genius, and, as he stated in one of his narcissistic stories, he considered himself akin to a god with power over life and death. The videos found, showing him stabbing and abusing screaming women, shows his utter disdain for human life. He saw these women as pieces of meat to use and abuse any way he wanted. The sickening disregard that Dwyer had for Elaine, I think, was shown by the fact that, even when in hospital, due to her wishing to end her life, he showed no concern, no pity. In fact, his only concern was getting her out of there so he could lure her to her death, which he did on the very day she was released. When she mentioned her suicidal thoughts and feelings, there was no concern. His only focus was on using this as an opportunity to kill her so that he could get his kicks. He manipulated and abused this poor woman, promising to give her a child, something he knew she wanted, and clearly he believed he could get away with murdering her because her death would be assumed to be a suicide. Graham Dwyer is a monster, a psychopathic creature devoid of remorse or conscience, who continues to pose an extreme danger to women, and who, even now, is trying to wriggle out of the punishment that he so rightly deserves. I have no doubt that if he's ever released, he will kill again and again, and carry on killing until he's stopped. May he rot in prison. So, I want to combine two things here. Firstly, it's something I've bitten my tongue about, but it needs to be said. I want to make it clear this doesn't apply to 99.9% of the comments on my pages, which are respectful and insightful. Unfortunately, there's the 0.1% who perhaps think they are funny, or the ones who just want to spread their hate-filled opinions. To be crystal clear, I won't have any disrespect to the victims of any of the offences I cover. I don't care what colour, gender, sexuality, nationality or religion these people were. I just don't care what mistakes they made during their lives. None of them deserve what happened to them. None of these people deserve to have their lives cruelly taken away, to be murdered, or raped, or in some other way violated, devastating the lives of their loved ones, or them themselves. I'm in no way arrogant enough to believe that any of the victims, who have thankfully survived, or the families of those who haven't, would ever see any of my videos. But if they did, imagine the hurt they would feel, the agony from seeing someone mock their loved one because of the colour of their skin, or whatever they do in the privacy of their own bedroom. Imagine if someone made a comment like that about your loved one. Would it be acceptable? So why is it acceptable for you to do that to other people? The memory of these people should be cherished, their lives celebrated, and most of all, their strength highlighted. They do not deserve to be demeaned by anyone. I keep an eye on my videos for comments like this, and as quickly as I can, I delete them, and I block someone from commenting again on the channel. Sorry, but you get one chance, but to be fair, you shouldn't even need to have one chance. I honestly do not care if my subscriber count went down to 0, I won't have the victims disrespected. As I said, this is only for a tiny fraction of the people who comment on my videos, but I needed to say this, just to make myself clear. Part of the reason why I wanted to say this is because of what I want to say about Elaine. Reports I've read highlight the pain that Elaine's family experienced due to the lurid nature of the details of her private life being splashed all over the newspapers, ignoring the woman she was. Everything I've read about Elaine shows that she was an incredibly kind-hearted woman, someone who cared deeply for everyone else, who wore a smile despite the fact she was deeply unhappy inside. I've met so many people like Elaine in my life, people who think they are worthless, who don't believe they deserve to be loved, and these people often try as hard as they can to help everyone else, They often focus all their energies on other people because they feel like they can't save themselves. Elaine loved children. She wanted to be a mother and was a wonderful aunt. She loved her job in a school and wanted to spend the rest of her life teaching, looking after and protecting the most precious gift that a parent can have. She had numerous health issues, both mentally and physically, but she kept going. Despite struggling so much with everything, she continued trying to better herself, to help others, and to brighten up their lives, while she clearly struggled with the darkness of her own. In court, it was said that Elaine ultimately wanted just 3 things: compassion, love, and ultimately a child. She wanted what we all want, but she had no idea how to get it, and likely felt she didn't deserve it. If you've ever had cripplingly low self-esteem and depression, you know that sometimes you would give anything to feel better, to escape that feeling, even just for a moment. Unfortunately, sometimes we rely on things to help us, which are ultimately destructive. We put ourselves in positions of danger because we don't care what happens to us, because we hate or sometimes even despise the person we are. Sex is a common way that people try to make themselves feel better, as, for that brief moment of being with someone, sometimes anyone will do, we will feel wanted and we can forget the emptiness inside. I think, in her desperation, Elaine turned to a world where she believed that giving herself completely to a man was a way to get the attention she craved, not realising, in her naivety, the extremely dangerous men that she would interact with. I imagine that Elaine was flattered that a man like Dwyer would be interested in her, and I think the things she let him do to her were a sign of desperation to keep this attention, but also a sign of how much she despised herself, allowing her body to be abused in such a vile way. Elaine did not want to be stabbed, and I don't think she really wanted to be abused at all. She just wanted to be loved, and didn't know what else to do to combat the emptiness inside and the loneliness she felt. I wish I'd known Elaine. I wish I could have made her feel wanted and less alone in this world, and I wish she'd lived to receive her BA in Montessori education, which her family collected on her behalf in 2014, the thing she had worked so hard for. I have no doubt she would have made an amazing teacher, and contributed far more to the world than the monster who snatched her life away from her ever did and ever will. I hope you're at peace, Elaine. Rest easy, and know that you'll always be remembered. So, what are your thoughts on this case? Had you heard about the death of Elaine O'Hara before? I confess, I hadn't heard about it, but I imagine this case is far better known in Ireland. If you like the content, please consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, which is £2.99 a month, or around $4. You get early access to videos and an icon next to your name, which changes from bronze to silver to gold, depending on how long you remember. Also, please consider sending a super thanks, which is a one-off payment to support the channel. Also, please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.